Hello and welcome back to Suicide Notes with Dr. Lulu. My name is Dr. Lulu, your host for 5 minutes show about suicide. Today we're going to discuss the definition of suicide and some words that concern suicide. And the first one is, what is suicide? But before I tell you what suicide is, I'm going to tell you a story. So in the year 2000, I was 7 months pregnant with my son, who is now 20 years old. So this son, that one. So in the year 2000, I was 7 months pregnant with that little guy. And I kept having these thoughts of calling a friend of mine. We're going to call her Ngozi because I can. I kept thinking about Ngozi and she just kept coming to my mind. And I kept thinking about calling her. But I never called her. I never called her because, like most people, I give myself all kinds of excuses. Oh, I'm pregnant. It's a difficult pregnancy. The dog ate the cat. I gave every reason but to pick up the phone and call her. And so finally one day I was like, you know what? I'm going to call this girl. And I picked up the phone and I called that number. And her niece said the words that I'll never forget. She said, oh, and so blew her brains out 3 weeks ago. Her 16-year-old niece said that to me. Said Auntie Ngozi blew her brains out 3 weeks ago. And that news sent me into preterm labor with my son. And so my son was born, yes, at 7 months. He was 2 months early. That was my first contact with suicide. My first time having anyone that I knew remotely that died by suicide. She was a colleague. She was a friend. I wouldn't call her a very, very close friend, but she was a friend enough for her spirit to come to me and want my attention, but I never listened. And so we're not going to talk about that yet, but I want you to just kind of let that sink in for a minute, okay, as we define suicide. So suicide is defined as any intentional, deliberate, or purposeful act that leads to the end of your life. So in other words, you have to do it yourself. It has to be intentional. It has to be deliberate and essentially purposeful, because for you, your purpose at that moment is to end your life. Now, I say that because there are accidental suicides as well. Okay, a lot of people who overdose by accident, technically they kill themselves, but because it was accidental, it's not a suicide. So I want you to remember the two things and the difference. So suicide is intentional, that the purpose of that action was to end their lives, and accidental suicide is something that leads to the end of one's life, but it was not intentional. Now, in the same vein, we're going to talk about other things that have to do with the definition of suicide. For instance, what is a suicide attempt? So a suicide attempt is another deliberate, intentional action to kill yourself, but doesn't end up killing you. And so that's the difference. So a suicide attempt does not end up leading to your death. A suicide ends up leading to your death. I think it's fair for us to start with definitions. It's always better to start that way. So a third definition I'm going to throw in is, what are suicidal thoughts? So suicidal thoughts are any thoughts. Anytime you're thinking about ending your life, you're thinking about killing yourself, the thoughts are coming to you. Should I do this? Should I not do this? 9 times out of 10, like I said last week, it doesn't just happen all of a sudden. Most times it's been simmering. And so the suicidal thoughts are any kind of thoughts that come to your head, asking you, begging you, pleading with you, or making you want to end your life or kill yourself. These are going to be 5 minutes only. They're going to be short. They're going to be quick. That's all I have for you today. Again, my name is Dr. Lulu, aka the Momatrician. If you're wondering, I'm a board-certified pediatrician and I'm a mom, and I'm coming to you live from San Antonio, Texas. Next week, we're going to look at some more words that describe suicide, some more verbiage around suicide. Stay tuned. It's going to be interesting. Bye.